Hi everyone, welcome to Woodblock Wednesday. I'm Elias Martin of CollectingJapanesePrints.com. I want to welcome all of you who are joining us on Facebook Live as well as on YouTube, where this video will eventually make its way. So welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, and as those of you familiar with the channel know, every Wednesday we get together and discuss Japanese prints, paintings, history, and culture. So today, I thought it would be neat to discuss one of my favorite artists of the 20th century. His name is Koshiro Onchi. And the reason I'm talking about him, besides him being my favorite artist, and I think he's just fantastic, and I can go on and on about him, and I have, I think, in previous videos, and I encourage all of you to check those videos out. But today I want to talk about him because we're sort of at the tail end of an exhibition here in Chicago. So if you're local, or if you could get to Chicago in the next 5 days, I highly encourage all of you to come and attend the Onchi Koshiro show at the Art Institute of Chicago. The show, I have it written down here. So the show's title is called Affection for Shapeless Things. And it started actually in October, and I went to see it shortly after it went up, but I think I might go right before it closes. And so it is a fantastic exhibition of Onchi's abstract works. Most of them, I think all of them, are taken from his latter part of his body of work. So they're abstract designs, and most of them are post-war designs that he produced that were acquired by Western collectors, particularly Oliver Statler, and then his sort of associates. And so, those prints ended up in Chicago because of Oliver Statler. So we have a lot to thank him for that. So I want to talk about Onchi because if you're going to come see the exhibition, you can enjoy the exhibition. You'll be able to see today, with today's talk, earlier works that sort of set the stage to see his later abstract work. I think that would be kind of a neat way of doing this. And also, the other reason why I was inspired to do this talk today is that I just got my Onchi oil on wood panel painting back from the painting conservator. It was a little dirty, and I had the conservator sort of clean the surface dirt, and it was previously in a frame, and I'm going to reframe it. So it is out now, and I thought it would be really great to share the work with all of you. I have shown it in a previous Woodblock Wednesday, as well as a lecture I gave on Onchi and Sosaku Hanga, but it was inside a frame and it had glass and it was really dark. And so this is the first time I'm actually being able to show this out of the frame, and it's going to get actually reframed, and it will be in an exhibition in the coming year. I think 2023 is the year where they're doing an exhibition on Meiji period art. This work will be included in that exhibition. It's going to travel. And so, I wanted to sort of enjoy it while I still had it, but also to share it with all of you. So without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look at what we have today. So as always, I'm going to pan out so you could see what we have to discuss today. And so as I mentioned, today's talk is on Onchi Koshiro. I think this light behind me is a little bit too bright. It's creating a glare, so I'm going to move it a little bit. So excuse me. So I think maybe that has helped. So for those of you who are not familiar with Onchi, he is an artist. He was born in 1891. He passed away in 1955. And Onchi was credited with creating the first work of abstraction in 1915. I mean, he was a fantastic artist that could paint, he could draw, he certainly created amazing woodblock prints, he did some photography. He was one of those artists that was really very talented. And this work is one of his earliest pieces that I'm aware of. It was done in 1908, about 1908, 1909, and it's a self-portrait. It's a self-portrait. It's oil on wood panel, and this painting was done right before Onchi was actually admitted into art school. And Onchi's father was very adamant that he wanted his son to attend medical school. And so Onchi, as he was growing up, was being groomed for that. He learned the German language in preparation to enter medical school, because in Japan at that time, most of the medical information was in German. And so knowing German certainly would have helped him in medical school. However, it just didn't work out. He didn't want to do it. And Onchi's brother passed away, and right around that time. And so his father he became a lot more sympathetic to Onchi's interest in the arts. And we're very grateful for that, because Onchi went on to have an amazing career producing some of Japan's most iconic prints. And so as an artist, Onchi is part of the Sosaku Hanga school, which means that he was part of the group of artists that produced artwork for themselves. For him, particularly his prints, he designed them himself and he executed them himself. He carved the blocks, he printed the prints. So they were not Shinhanga, which were basically continuation of the Edo period collaborative process of making prints. So Onchi was part of the group of artists who was very against doing that work and doing their own work and doing their work for art's sake. A lot of their designs weren't done for commercial purposes. They were done, for themselves. And in this painting, he did this in preparation for him going into art school. So it predates art school. And when I look at this, I think it's so beautifully executed. I have a light that's coming in from the side that perhaps is helping my presentation here. But I'm going to see if I can move it a little bit, maybe to bring out a little bit more of the light and brings out the colors more. Okay, that looks a little bit better on my screen. And so what you're seeing here is a stunning work that's done. It's almost, I kind of think of a couple artists when I see this painting. Certainly Onchi at this time, this is the Meiji period. And this is a time when art was being imported into Japan via magazines and books, as well as the art itself. So Onchi was aware of Western art through publications, and because he could read and write German, he was also aware of German expressionism and other German artistic trends. And this painting is done almost like in a Cézanne-like style. But when I look at it, it also looks kind of contemporary to me. That's how forward-looking and advanced Onchi was for his time. This painting kind of reads almost like a Lucian Freud in many ways. I just think it's fantastic. And when we look closer to the work, you could see how expressive the piece is. Now, previously, as I said in my introduction, I've shown this painting before in my lectures and Woodblock Wednesdays, but it was in a frame, and it was a much darker work in the sense that it had a sort of a sheen of grit and dirt. And so for many of you who own paintings, oil paintings, and it's something to know that you could actually have them cleaned by professional conservators. This work was in a home that had smokers. And so the smoking and having a painting, an oil painting, without a protection of a glass will certainly yield a darkening to the colors. And so you can have that soot removed fairly easily, and it won't harm the painting. And so it was hard for me to sort of I should have taken a picture of what it looked like. My conservator did, but trust me when I say that, I would say that it is about 20% lighter in person, which is pretty dramatic, actually, when you're thinking about it. So this work, being very early, is also a wonderful example of a double-sided painting. And so if I could do this, here, hold on one second as I use my other hand. Now this is the other side of the painting, and it's actually quite a surprise to many people. It was to me when I first saw it in person. The reverse is another self-portrait done in 1914. So this is a painting done when he's actually in art school, experimenting with printmaking and other art forms. But on this side, you'll see that it's very, very expressive like the front, but very different in a sense. It's the colors are starker and bolder, and it's more emotionally charged. He uses a lot of the red pigment around his lips and around his eyes, in the ear. There's some purple shading around the other part of the eye, and so the work has he almost makes himself look in some ways like a vampire. I mean, I say that joking around, but at the same time, it does have that emotionally charged quality. And if you're familiar with Onchi's work of this time, particularly his prints for his self-directed art magazine called Tsukuhae, you'll recall that those images do have that emotionally charged quality. And so this painting really pretty much is indicative of that time. And Onchi described that period as a sort of a romantic lyricism. And so he was interested in showing, the Taisho period as something that's kind of romantic but emotionally charged. And he also had a friend of his colleague, Tanaka Kyokichi, who participated in the magazine with him and Fujimori. He had his friend, pass away, at this time. Tanaka died of TB. And so imagine you're working with your friend, your colleague, your artist in arms with you and doing this really fine work, and he passes away. And Tanaka's work is also very emotionally charged. It has kind of a mystical quality to it. Clearly some of the images are dealing with his impending death. And so Onchi in this design clearly is showcasing his portrait among that climate of all these emotional things happening to him. And so what I thought would be neat is showing this double-sided painting in conjunction, with some of his prints from this period. There's a glare coming off the top, so I'm going to try to angle my phone in the right way. But this work was done in 1914, and it's called Lyric 1. It has a lot of nicknames, but basically what you have here is a design that has a eye right at the center, and there's these interesting lines that sort of cut the image into thirds. So you have this section, this top section, and then this bottom. And graphically, it's really stunning. I think I can angle it. You could see how there's actually, the background is really dark black. And the sheen is reflecting a certain way that makes the print look lighter. But it is a very dark print, very emotionally charged work. And this particular impression is actually a really rare self-printed work. It comes from the family, and this design was included in the self-directed magazine of Onchi's Tsukuhae, but there were two sort of versions of that magazine. A version that was produced by a publisher, and those prints were mechanically produced, and then these self-directed, self-printed works that the artists did for themselves, and they passed out these designs to each other. And so there were some that were entirely done by hand, whereas there was also a version of it done by a machine. And this particular impression was done by hand. You could see Onchi's sloppy printing on the left and right, which is really neat to see, because we later go on to see a lot of that kind of sloppy printing in a lot of his prints. But the sloppiness is actually kind of interesting, and I like it. It really showcases a very expressive quality in printmaking, and it clearly is almost in a way his signature. And you could kind of identify prints being self-printed by how sloppy or kind of wet or off-register they are. So that's kind of interesting. So this work is from 1914, and I'm going to show two more works. These were done in 1915. This one and this one. And this design is not, well, you can read it as almost a pseudo-abstract. Both of these are not really considered abstract yet. You could kind of read a figure in recline here. This is a hand here. There's another hand there. But then you could also kind of read it as a landscape. And these are the tops of hills or a mountain. And so it's not clear exactly what it is. You could certainly read a lot into it, but this is sort of the type of design that Onchi was producing at the time. And you could see that, again, this design has a great deal of emotion. It's quite striking, and it draws the viewer in. There's a depth of emotion in this design that, just you can't walk away from this design without feeling something. And that really is the essence of experiencing an Onchi print in person. If you're ever lucky to see one that is printed by the master's hand, you will always sort of get a sense that something is happening. His printing is fantastic. And the last work I want to show is not part of the Tsukuhaya magazine, but a design done in 1915. So this one illustrates the face of a boy. This might be a boy in a crowd. It could be all kinds of different things. But what I want to highlight on this is that it has a very strong German expressionist quality to it. And as I mentioned earlier, that Onchi was very interested in German art. He could read and write German because of his parents' interest in him obtaining a medical degree. And so he used that to his advantage. He learned a lot about German expressionism. And this design really showcases Onchi's interest in that genre. So now I'm going to zoom in so you could see all the works in person. Well, as close as you can. You could kind of see here the way that he overlapped the blue over the black. It's very expressive, really cool, on how that printing effect was done. And moving back to this one, let me see if I can angle it one last time. So you could see the back is actually a black matte, but there's a sheen to it in a direct light. But really the design should be seen more. If you could just imagine it as sort of a black matte background. What's interesting about this design too is that if I move and make invert the design upside down, it still works. The eye is still there and sort of showcasing its power over the viewer. So it's a really cool design. So I'm going to go back to the painting, and I'll zoom in so you could see the reverse, and then I'll flip it over to the front. So as I mentioned, today's sort of presentation is inspired by, see if I could move it. No, I need two hands. by the Art Institute's current Onchi exhibition, which closes in about 5 days. It closes on January 10th. And so if you're local and you can come and check it out, I highly encourage you to do that. Heck, if you're not local, but you want to take a trip to Chicago, this exhibition is certainly worthwhile. And, these works really showcase Onchi's brilliant artistic talent early on in his career. I mean, this piece being done before he even entered art school is pretty astonishing on how well he was able to produce oil painting, particularly one of self-portrait. It's funny. I would think when you look at the quality of each side, I would think this is the later version, whereas the one on the back looks a little bit more amateurish, but I would say maybe a little amateurish, but it's more expressive, and it certainly showcases his interest in this sort of raw emotion and how an artist can imbue emotion into his art. And so what's noteworthy is that, during the Meiji period when this painting was done, the idea of an artist was just sort of being born. And before, in the Edo period, it wasn't really about an artist. It was about the product. And so the focus of the artist was really their craft and how well they've mastered it. So they were really more artisans than they were artists. Of course, there's exceptions, and there were certainly brilliant individual artists that obtain, notoriety, and there was a following for them, certainly. However, generally speaking, the idea of an artist as an individual with something to say is very new in Japanese art history. And Onchi was one of those first artists that showcased that ability to have something to say and to share it and to advance it in so many different forms, many different art forms. So, of course, in oil painting and in print production. And so, I want to sort of just highlight, again, the early part of his career. And he was such an advocate for Sosaku Hanga, or creative prints, that though he loved abstraction, he sort of postponed it. He produced it, as I said, 1915. He's credited with producing the first work of abstraction in Japan in any form. But then he encountered problems because the audience, the Japanese, didn't understand abstraction so well, and he was trying to promote Sosaku Hanga, period, that he didn't want his love of abstraction to sort of impugn the progress of Sosaku Hanga. So he set it aside, and he produced pretty much works of representational subjects from the 20s up until about the 40s. And then he started experimenting with abstraction again. And certainly by the time the war was over and the Americans and Westerners were in Japan occupying, helping to rebuild the country, it's when Onchi and his circle of artists could get together and produce works of abstraction and then also offer them for sale. So in many cases, it was the first time that any of these artists could live off of their artwork. Most of them were not professional artists. They were, they had different occupations. And Onchi was interesting because his family was very wealthy, and he was well off already, but he was a very successful book designer. He basically created covers for books, for magazines, for musical scores. He created fonts. He was kind of a graphic designer before that term was ever invented. And so Onchi did that as his career. So when he produced prints, he was not producing them with a commercial purpose in mind. So this is why his artwork is so rare, but also why I think it's so coveted, because it really shows an artist working on his own terms for his own reasons, which highlight his world, and without the filters of commercial or economic sort of restrictions. So certainly he had problems, with the idea of censorship and what he could show due to the times he was working in, but his artwork was very much still in line with what he wanted to do, as opposed to, I would imagine, some commercial artists who were sort of not, I won't use the word forced, but they were encouraged to produce artwork by a publisher so that it would sell. So, I mean, that's sort of what the backdrop of what is happening. And so if you come to the Art Institute, you will see a lot of, I would say it's exclusively post-war, and there are all of these abstract works that were produced with experimental sort of techniques in producing woodblock prints. So it's a great exhibition, and Onchi, as I've always mentioned, he's arguably one of the best 20th century artists Japan produced. So I'm going to zoom in one last time on the work so you can see them. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on our latest installment of Woodblock Wednesday. And as all of you know, every Wednesday we get together here on Facebook Live or on YouTube to discuss Japanese prints, paintings. And currently, I'm having an exhibition of Tanaka etchings on my website, collectingjapaneseprints.com. I want to encourage all of you to check out the exhibition. One last thing. I have some books to show you. So I always like to show the books that relate to what I'm discussing. So I kind of jumped the gun here. So really quick, these are some really great books on Onchi. This is one of the first books produced after an exhibition. It's called Onchi, A Poet of Colors and Forms. It dates to 1994, I think. Yeah, 94, 95. It's a very, very handsome, helpful book. I have available the book on my bookstore. This is the latest book for the most recent exhibition on Onchi that was at the Museum of Modern Art Tokyo. It's a great book. It does replace the other Onchi books, though this book has several drawings and paintings not included in this book. And then this reference is an exhibition catalog for an exhibition that was in Australia in the Gallery of New South Wales. And it's a fantastic exhibition. It was a fantastic exhibition, and the catalog really showcases that. And the front cover happens to show this particular print, though I think it's interesting because this is the way the print should look, and they reversed it. So it's the inverse of the design. I think maybe the graphic designer thought it would work better as the cover. But anyway, these are books that are all available in my bookstore, which are really great additions for your library if you want to learn more about Onchi. So having said that, I want to thank all of you for joining me, and hopefully we'll get together next Wednesday. There's been a lot of appointments for me. It's the end of the year and the beginning of the next, so Happy New Year to all of you, by the way. But I'm getting ready for another exhibition, and so I'm working on something that will probably hit my website at the end of January, early February. There will be some wonderful 20th century prints, some fantastic Hasuis, some fantastic Hiroshi Yoshidas, very large, oversized Yoshidas, as well as a bunch of other stuff that's just great. So that's something to look forward to, of course. And, visit my site. There's all of the Woodblock Wednesdays archived on the site, linked to YouTube, as well as my seminars. So enjoy looking through those, or of course the bookstore, or my offerings. So thanks for joining us, and I hope to see you next week on the next installment of Woodblock Wednesday. Until then, thank you.